1, 2. Simkin. Who hates Simkin? She hates Simkin. He hates Simkin. I hate Simkin. You hate Simkin. She hates Simkin. We hate Simkin. Who hates Simkin? I hate Simkin. They hate Simkin.
Hello, everybody. It's Jonathan Simkin from 604 Records here in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. I'll just grab the one that's right in front of me, which is, oh, that's a little loud. Here. This is LEN. LEN were a band. I wonder if they're still around, like if they still consider themselves. I mean, the members are still around. I saw Marc from LEN last summer in Toronto, which was great. We had a nice hangout. He came to a showcase that we put on in Toronto last summer. It was so great seeing him. I was involved in a very high-profile lawsuit in the late 90s, not as a party, but as a lawyer. And it was a lawsuit that my client had against Sarah McLachlan. And this was before Sarah was really huge, at least when it all started. I didn't even know who she was when this client first approached me. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because I was sitting in my law office. This is before 604. I'm sitting in my law office and the phone rings. And the person on the other end of the phone says, "Is this Jonathan Simkin?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Are you the guy suing Sarah McLachlan?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I want you to be my lawyer." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he's like, "You got balls, man. Like, I want you to be my lawyer." And it was Marc Costanzo from the band LEN. And I don't remember a whole lot about that first conversation, but I remember saying, "Well, listen, here's my address." Because remember, this is before there was meaningful internet. In fact, I don't even think, because that would have been in 96 or 95. So there wasn't really internet the way there is now, clearly. I think Steal My Sunshine, which of course was their big hit, I think was 98, 99. And it was, I believe, the third most played song in the world that year. But the thing is, LEN existed in sort of a different form long before Steal My Sunshine. Like many bands who seem like they're a one-hit, or not a one-hit wonder, but like are a band that has overnight success. That was a phrase I meant. A lot of times it's not how it appears. You know, like Carly Rae Jepsen, everybody's always like, "Oh, you know, overnight success," which is kind of true. But we had put out an album before, which I've already talked about on this podcast, that was successful, like before Call Me Maybe. And LEN was similar in that respect. LEN, in fact, I remember the first thing they ever sent me. I still have it, which is they sent me a VHS of a video for a song called Candy Pop, which is on their first album called Superstar. So 94, 95. And I'll tell you something that's funny. If you go and look at the video for Candy Pop, which is still online, still on YouTube, in a lot of ways, it's exactly the same as the video for Steal My Sunshine. It's just without a budget. Because like Steal My Sunshine, we had signed to Work Group, which was a big Sony label that had a bunch of other, big artists, Jennifer Lopez and Eagle Eye Cherry and Jamiroquai, if I remember correctly. And so, that had a budget, but the video for Candy Pop really didn't. It's just funny to me because, once in a while I'll look at the Candy Pop video, and in part because it's such a great video. I mean, it really is. And it kind of had all the elements that sort of added up later to their success. That video is a video of basically Marc and his sister Sharon, who really were the core of LEN, sort of just around with a bunch of pals, like in a parking lot and on a ski hill. One thing I'll say is that Marc is a super talented guy, but he also always had a good sense of other people who were talented that he wanted to surround himself with. So if you look at that video for Candy Pop, you will see Brendan Caning, I believe, Brendan, who ended up having a lot of success with Broken Social Scene, but he was in the early versions of LEN. So was Buck 65, if I recall correctly, who has had an interesting career as well as a musician and as a host on CBC. And then in subsequent versions of LEN, Mocha Only, who ended up being in Swollen Members, who I still stay in touch with. Great guy who lives in Vancouver. So yeah, Marc was always very good at assembling a talented group of people around him, including the other people who were in that band. And great album. But the funny thing is, they weren't a pop band at the time. They were considered an alternative band. And they were a band that really sort of had a moment before their big moment. Because, in Toronto, they were considered a really cool band and a cool sort of underground alternative band. It's interesting, right? Because you look at Wikipedia and it's right now it says they are still a alternative rock band, and it still has Marc and Sharon listed. I haven't talked to Sharon in a million years, but in those early years, boy, we had fun. We had so much fun. I'd fly into Toronto. Marc and Sharon were always so generous. We used to stay at their place. And I remember one year they weren't there, or at least they weren't there when we arrived. I think I was with my girlfriend, now my wife, Jennifer. And, we landed and Marc said he made arrangements because he said, "Hey, do you need a car while you're in Toronto?" I said, "Yeah, that would be great." So you can drive my Range Rover. He had this really limited edition Range Rover. I remember we got picked up at the airport and it was Greg Norrie from Treble Charger. That's how I met Greg, was he picked us up at the airport and I guess he had been driving Marc's car and then we got to drive it afterwards. But Superstar was the first record. And again, it wasn't huge. No, it wasn't huge, but it was a success. And then there was the next record, which Get Your Legs Broke, which, by the way, is also an incredible album, an absolutely incredible album, which I highly recommend. And again, these are all available. The videos are all still online. The song Get Your Legs Broke is incredible. It's this weird sort of ballad. I don't know. You got to listen to it. Smarty Pants, that was a great song. I remember there's a video. That's a video where I could see Drew Lidke's face in it. That also, attracted a lot of attention. And I could be wrong about this, but I think that's what got them their publishing deal. I think that was the record that got the attention of Michael McCarty, also has been a guest on the podcast. And then he signed them. And, as I've said before, Michael's, as far as I'm concerned, the best sort of publisher, Canadian publisher, especially at that time when it was a very different game. Michael not only had great ears, but he also was willing to spend money on the bands. Once he signed the band, he was committed to them. And I can't remember if he paid for these albums, but he might have, because that's the kind of thing that he would do. And then Steal My Sunshine happened. So that was the third album. That's the one I'm looking at right here, which is You Can't Stop the Bum Rush, right? Which is a pretty goofy name for an album, but it's funny. That's what got them signed. And they got a manager, Graham Lowe, who I believe ended up marrying Sharon from the band. There's a lot of internal drama too, because I don't know how much I want to say about it. Well, I guess it's okay. This is all public, I think. Derek from the band was dating Sharon, and then Graham, the manager, started dating her. And as you can imagine, that didn't make for great, vibes, but happens, whatever. That year or that year and a half when Steal My Sunshine came out, boy, oh boy, what a ride. Now, for me personally, that was the first time I had worked with an artist who had serious international success. I'd had some success with artists before that record. Matthew Goodband's a great example. Holly McNarlin's a great example. But that one was the first artist I ever worked with who blew up internationally. That song was massive all over the world. I mean, massive. And I think it went to number one in just about every country of the world. I have this memory of it going to number one the week of Christmas in the UK. It was literally the number one song in the UK the week of Christmas, which probably was 98 or maybe 99. But regardless, that was a whirlwind of insanity. They were touring all over the world. And they were kind of crazy. And I mean, I don't think Marc would have a problem with me saying that. They were pretty crazy. Because they did a lot of stuff in Vancouver, they actually rented a house in Vancouver right by Grouse Mountain on the North Shore. And, you know, Marc had that Range Rover then, that beautiful car. And they were so kind to us. Basically, we had full access to their house and their car when they weren't around. They were very generous with things like that, which was really lovely. And we were generous back as well. I have so many sort of weird memories of that period of time. I had mentioned that Sarah McLachlan lawsuit earlier, and we lost it, by the way. That's, and sometimes I make jokes about that, like, what's your claim to fame? I say, wow, I lost a lawsuit to Sarah McLachlan. I did make a bunch of people cry during cross-examination, though, so at least I have that. Unfortunately, the judge didn't make the ruling based on who cried more. If he did, I think we would have won. But yeah, and I'll never forget, like, the day that decision came down was harsh. Like, we thought we were going to lose everything. Like, we thought we were going to go bankrupt. We escaped to the LEN house up in North Vancouver. They weren't in town. We had the keys, and we sort of rode the storm out in their house because the press was calling us, and it was brutal. So yeah, it's funny. I mean, just so many funny memories about that. That was a really great experience. And I don't want to repeat stories I've said in other podcasts, but I think in a Michael McCarty one, I did talk about the fact that I ended up having to sue LEN, unfortunately. There was a dispute over legal fees. We settled it, and it was totally fine and no hard feelings, I don't think, on either side. But it was hard. Like, we sort of lost touch with them for a while. That was hard. I'd gotten them out of their deal with Sony and got them a new deal with DreamWorks. And the last really clear memory I have is that they were in town in Vancouver at the Warehouse studio, Bryan Adams' studio, starting to work on the follow-up record for DreamWorks. And it all just kind of fell apart. And the memories are so vague. It's unfortunate because I don't exactly remember what happened. I just know that when I walked into the studio that day, I was concerned just because the entourage had grown huge. And, you can't support an entourage with one hit. You kind of need more than one hit to support an entourage. And then I'm trying to remember, like, why didn't we ever put out that album on DreamWorks and what happened? And that's where I'm a little, the details get kind of blurry. But I will say that Steal My Sunshine kind of changed my career, because it's one thing to have a big success in Canada. It's another thing to have a big success all over the world. And that was a big success all over the world. It connected me with all sorts of different people. It connected me with people in Los Angeles in ways I hadn't been connected before, and really kind of set the stage for me for what happened later with Nickelback.
I've seen, like, a lot of people online attribute the kind of difference in success to the summer vibes versus the winter vibes. So obviously that song dropped in the summer. True. And there seemed to be a lot of people saying that's a big part of the nostalgia for them, is it gives them summer memories.
Yeah, and I should say a bit more about that. Thank you for bringing that up, because I mentioned the similarities without really talking about them. So you look at Candy Pop, and it's Marc and Sharon and a bunch of their friends around. They're on a parking lot around. They're around in their car. They're around on a ski hill. Then, fast forward to Steal My Sunshine, and what's that video? It's Marc and Sharon around. They're around on a beach, though, in Florida. They're around in an airport. They're around in a nightclub, because that video had money behind it. And I'll never forget, at work group in Sony in Los Angeles, they were like, do you have any ideas because the song had already sort of blown up. It's kind of like Call Me Maybe That Way. By the time we did the deal, the song had already started to become a monster. And they were like, do you have any ideas for a video? And Marc said, well, I need $300,000, I think was the number. And they said, well, what do you need that for? He said, well, I got this idea. I want to fly me and a bunch of my friends to Miami Beach to film the video. And the guy from the label said, okay, but like, what's the concept? And Marc said, well, that's the concept. I'm going to go to Florida with a bunch of my friends and around. And they agreed. But it is funny, like, watch the two videos and you'll see what I'm talking about. Very similar vibe. It's just one vibe is with a budget. and one vibe isn't with a budget. So that's why one of them is filmed in Florida and one of them is filmed, I think, in what's that ski hill in Ontario. So, it's just kind of funny that way. I think the real big difference is that one of them was a massive radio hit and one of them wasn't. Like, I don't even think Candy Pop got any radio play. It was popular in Toronto and people knew who the band was. But again, no internet then. So, I mean, that was still when radio was kind of the only route from A to B. If you weren't played on the radio, nobody really knew your song. So that to me was really the big difference. The budget and the fact that one of them was one of the biggest selling singles ever and one of them wasn't. There's always a weird sexual kind of weirdness between Marc and Sharon, and not in reality, not in real life, but in those videos. Like you look at the Candy Pop video, and there's a moment, I think towards the end of the video, where the two of them are in not the back seat, but it's like a hatchback car, and they have it folded down, and the two of them are kind of lying side by side in this car. And man, you almost think they're going to kiss for a second. Like it almost has the vibe. And I used to get asked about that a lot. Like, what the hell's that about? And, I think it's one of those things we didn't really necessarily talk about super consciously, but I think they knew. Like, I think that was kind of a conscious decision to add that element just as a weird element to kind of, I don't know if it was to freak people out, just to have, add something for people to notice and talk about. It worked. People talked about it. And I got asked that question all the time. And then if you look at Steal My Sunshine, same thing. There's like a couple of moments where if you didn't know better, you wouldn't think they were brother and sister. You'd think they were a couple. So I think they played on that and successfully. And it was kind of a weird genius kind of stroke to do that. So
a lot of people, like when they are talking about why they like the song and stuff, where they list things like the kind of nonsensical lyrics and like weirdness and like the whole abnormality of it. But then that kind of begs the question of like, why did that only work for one massive hit and then they do that across the rest of their music and it doesn't land?
If I had the answer to that, they would probably hate me using the phrase, but they are often identified as a one-hit wonder. Now, in fairness, in Canada, they had more than one hit for sure. There were other songs on that album. Marc's sensibilities, at least at the time, were so quirky. Like, it's like the essence of a quirky pop band. And that's hard to nail. Like, when you're a band like Ween, where it's like every song's kind of kooky. I mean, it was a little bit like that with LEN, but I'm telling you, you dive into some of those albums, some of those older albums, they're incredible. Like, I think there's a whole bunch of songs that could have been hits. That one just happened to nail it. And I don't think the other ones, I guess, did to the same extent. I mean, Candy Pop to me is a hit song. I love it. I still listen to that album. Like I have a LEN playlist on my streaming. It's probably 25 songs. And not just because I worked with them, because I think there's that many songs that are great. It's a great question. Boy, I wish I had the answer. If I had the answer, I'd be even richer than I am. But Marc's doing great. I mean, Marc's working in Nashville as a songwriter. I think he publishes people a little bit. He's always been a bit of an entrepreneur when it comes to the music stuff. So much fun. We had so much fun with that band and with Graham, their manager. Like I remember they did that Snow Jam thing on Much Music, which was a thing, well, when there was a Much Music, where they every winter would have an event at like a ski hill. And I think that one was in Sun Peaks in Kelowna, British Columbia. So we all went up there together and it was just, I don't know. It was just a riot. That's all. We just had a lot of fun together.
I was going to ask about the budget you mentioned for the music video. There was a few people online talking about how like it's literally the majority of it was spent on the partying they would do.
100%.
Of 300K.
I mean, they were doing things like renting those scooters and stuff like that. Oh, I know the other thing I was going to say, which is just one of the things that was interesting about Bum Rush was there are so many samples on that record. And this was before, I mean, nowadays samples are a pretty common thing and there's standard ways of dealing with it and standard practices. Not the case then. It was the wild, wild west when it came to samples. The sample that forms the basis of Steal My Sunshine is the song More, More, More by Andrea True Connection, which itself is a kooky song in a way. That was a song, another one-hit wonder, Andrea True connection. Andrea True was a porn star. She did porn films. That song is about pornography. So if you want to know how I really feel, get the cameras rolling, get the action going. If you listen to More, and that song's very popular. And I mean, it's been licensed for shampoo commercials. And so that itself is a massive hit. The part you want to listen to, if you want to hear what the sample is the part, there's an instrumental break towards the end. There's like a little flugelhorn thing that plays or something. And then there's this dome, you hear the chords and you hear that cowbell, which really formed the basis of Steal My Sunshine. And I'll just never forget, I had to negotiate so many sample clearances. And I didn't know, I mean, I knew what I was doing, but there was no standard practice for that. And looking back, and I think Marc would agree, I would hope he would agree, he got a really good deal in terms of the percentage of the song he owns. I'm not going to say what it is because that's confidential, but he got a very, very good deal. We've talked about it since. If this was today, if this was a song that came out today, he would not have gotten the percentage of the song that he ended up getting. And I think that's been sort of like a pension for him. Like I see Still My Sunshine on Tropicana orange juice ads all the time. Like that has been a really enduring sort of legacy with that song.
Simkin.